I didn't trust it. They smiled at me first.
Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitbadger.com. Out here to share today some pretty cool stuff, kind of products and technology from Revision Eyewear. Fall of 2022, had the good fortune to go down to pretty cool kind of like media event basically, where some different people, whether it was buddy Ian from over at Recoil, some other different outlets, invited people down to show what they had been working on. Revision has been doing some pretty cool stuff like technology-wise to come up with some really unique space or unique things within the space of lenses as far as eyewear, protective eyewear specifically for like military applications. And with that, they're actually doing some cool stuff for the prescription side of it too, which I of course am looking forward to. But went down there to Sun Valley, Ketchum, Idaho, and yeah, some pretty neat information got passed along and some pretty cool kind of practical application with respect to the use of technology as well. We initially started with kind of a classroom portion, and they basically explained, hey, here's the problem and here is our solution. So problem being with lenses, once you get away from just like a clear ballistic lens, if you're going to be wearing something, why not wear something that ultimately is advantageous? So when it goes into the space of like military, which they sell to the military, what is some sort of performance enhancing attribute we can like bring to the table? So when it comes to shooting eyewear, they'll have different tints, which sometimes will try and increase contrast. Problem is a lot of those tints end up like getting rid of colors. And when you're doing things, colors matter, especially certain tasks and jobs within the military where, like if you're colorblind, you're not going to be an EOD tech. So colors do matter. So they approach the problem kind of a little differently than companies have done historically. And they essentially look at a bunch of different regions around the world, whether it is desert regions or places where there's tons of vegetation, like canopy, think jungle, things like that. Alpine regions, or even like snow, to include, hey, is it a snowy region in direct sunlight or is it a snowy region with heavy cloud cover? And so basically looking at satellite mapping or satellite imagery of all these different regions, putting it into this crazy computer algorithm, essentially, and then it spits out basically a color palette saying, hey, this is the spectrum of all these different colors, and within these different regions, here's colors that probably matter more than others. And so then taking that information, turning it into, again, like wild mad science stuff, basically creating lenses or tints for lenses that essentially shrink or elongate depending on the type of tint through the spectrum. So what do I mean by that? Because I'm like, I don't even know what that means. So they described it or displayed it basically as one of their slides when they were going through talking about it. And you have like the frequencies of light, the spectrum, going into infrared, going off ultraviolet, all that stuff. You have the visible spectrum. And so what they did was say, hey, in this certain environment, what's important is basically kind of more these reds as opposed to say these blues over here in this environment right here. And they're like, okay, so how do we do that? So they basically elongated, again, the light as I understand it, the light transmission through these lenses because of tinting, elongated out over here on the side where those reds are going to come through at a little bit of the cost of blues. So maybe your blue is a tiny bit more subdued than it is like clear lens. But with that, you now look and everything ends up popping out, any type of red or anything like that. Like amazingly so. And you're like, that can't be real. And then you walk up to whatever it is, leaf or something like that. And you look close and you're like, oh, there's actually a lot of red here. Like I just don't really notice it at distance. Throw these lenses on and you're like, yeah, like I can see everything, like super HD, everything's crisp, like tons of contrast. it's actually really amazing. So with that technology, they applied it basically across all of these different environments. Again, like, hey, what are, as far as the color palette for this area, like what's high value color versus those other ones, and basically started kind of tweaking that, elongating out the spectrum that you're going to see of maybe these greens. And so maybe you're not seeing as many of these yellows, again, depending on environment, and came up with a bunch of different lenses. And to clarify more accurately, not a bunch of different lenses, but a bunch of different tints based on environments. And they've coined it their I-Vis Technology, I guess it is. And with that, 6 different ones. So you have a alpine, you also have a desert, a kind of canopy, forest, jungle. You have a kind of jack of all trades, kind of a broad spectrum. And then the last 2 are basically snow. So overcast snow, like snow on the ground, overcast snow, and then also like bright sunny snow. And so again, lenses made specific, or tints for lenses made specifically for these different environments that basically enhance your ability to see things, creating more contrast and higher resolution so you can spot things. And it's actually pretty amazing, like once we had the opportunity to throw them on. But that is big picture, the premise of kind of what they're doing in their I-Vis technology. And then with that, they also have a bunch of other stuff, whether it's just the actual ballistic rating of their lenses or their anti-fog, which haven't had a chance to really play with it, but as I understand it, they're trying to figure out how to fog some of their lenses. Like they can't get them to fog, which if you've ever dealt with lenses, especially in different environments where maybe it's cold and or wet, it's a pretty big deal. So pretty neat what they're doing. But after we had that initial kind of lecture and demonstrate, or yeah, I guess lecture portion, slides, stuff like that, kind of the theory behind the technology, how it came about, we actually had a pretty cool opportunity to go kind of mess around with it. So we ended up going up to Trailhead outside of Sun Valley, and they had set up kind of these 2 different displays, one kind of a control and then this other one, and arrayed all kinds of different items, some of them fairly obvious, some kind of hidden, all different ones, and then ended up looking across at one and hey, like what can you see that's maybe out of place? Like this is what's in play in this area here. And so people had the opportunity to go up there and look through just kind of like gray tinted lenses basically, and then turn around and look at another area, again, set up with all kinds of different things for you to spot, and those with some of their I-Vis technology. And it was pretty neat, just kind of, I mean, it was, in fairness, kind of a night and day as far as things standing out, again, depending on environment with the different lenses. It's really neat to walk through that. And then, since we're already somewhere super beautiful and really cool, why not continue to do cool stuff? They actually had a guide there, really cool guy who, like, his thing is mountain goats, not sheep, mountain goats, I believe. And they're up in kind of mountains right around there. Yeah, there are mountain goats that live up there. And it was pretty cool. His ability to spot them was uncanny, but we ended up basically hiking up a trail, and we'd stop and be like, all right, like, let's look up here. And again, we had equipped with some of the new glass or I-Vis technology in their glasses, and it was pretty cool. Again, creating that really high contrast to where you could ultimately end up picking things out probably easier than you could otherwise. And yeah, got to end up hiking up a ways and checking out some mountain goats, which is pretty neat. And as a quick aside, couldn't find a dog sitter. It's in southern Idaho, I'm in northern Idaho, so I just drove down there. I brought Peanut. But he loves hiking. So there we are at this trailhead. Again, active trailhead. Someone comes through, he's like, oh, you're going for a hike? I love hikes. Started following this guy, unbeknownst to me. and disappeared. So eventually I'm like, where the heck did Peanut go? And I'm like, you know what? I think he followed that guy that was walking through here. Sure enough, he did. So I'm like, I need to go find my dog. And so we had kind of wrapped up what we were doing. Some people were still looking at some of the mountain goats. And I ended up hiking up the trail. Finally ran into the guy on his way back down with Peanut. But at that point, I was so close to the top, little alpine lake. I'm like, why not go to a lake? So hiked the rest of the way up there. Super beautiful. And I'm like, I'm at Alpine Lake. Why not just go swimming? So stripped down and went swimming. I will say it was freezing cold. So hopped out after not very long in the water, dried off, hiked back down. Pretty cool up there though. And while they have a number of different kind of frame and lens designs, these are the ones that I've been using. This particular lens tint is their canopy kind of jungle or dark timber, which we have lots of, especially when the cedars gets really dark. And for me, to my eye, they definitely create a lot of contrast with respect to reds, like lots of contrast. And these are basically a prescription insert. I may have noticed wear prescription lenses, so being able to throw these on with the inserts in there. And it's really crazy too, because this time of year, well, one, leaves are changing, but also up here in northern Idaho, there's tons of huckleberries. And this time of year, they're all kind of turning red, and they're like fire red with these. It's pretty wild, but it's pretty neat just the amount of contrast you get. And one of the other places I actually used these was recently. I was back down in southern Idaho, down kind of like by Salmon, Idaho, and I ended up going hunting. Took my boys down. We were down deer hunting with a buddy of mine, Sparky. He guides down there. Joker's Wild Outdoors. Amazing setup down there. Pretty neat. And we all filled our tags. It was a ton of fun. But definitely ended up wearing these out there too. And again, it's pretty cool. Just super HD is what it comes down to. And that really high contrast and definition. And yeah, pretty neat. As far as just that lens technology and actual practical application, as far as being able to just spot things that you probably otherwise wouldn't spot out in the field. Well, that was kind of day one, the kind of dive into the technology, and then a little bit of practical application as far as going out, doing some hiking and just kind of visual exercises. Day two, actually got to do some shooting. So the event was put on in part with Sig Sauer, and they ended up coming out, bringing a bunch of guns, a bunch of the Sig crosses, and some of their other cool stuff, which some of it we'd actually used that prior day, one of which was their image stabilizing binoculars, which is amazing. If you ever try and just hold binoculars 10 or God forbid 12 or 15x, you're just seeing everything move unless you go and stabilize off of something. With those image stabilizing ones, pretty neat. You can just stand there and be like, oh cool, check stuff out, and not get seasick watching the image move all over. But they brought out their guns, and then I think on their guns, I'm sure they had some of their their Sig scopes. But then probably one of the cooler things they brought out was their new, I want to say 8K rangefinder, Sig Kilo 8K, 8000. And that thing is amazing. I have the Kilo 5K, just reviewed it not too long ago as of filming this. 8K, so much better. In part, you lay something, it gives you all your information right there. The display is incredible inside of it. But had a pretty fun day getting to do some shooting out there on that range. Just, again, outside of Ketchum, Idaho. And yeah, had a blast out there.
This target, that first knoll, that's the near hill. Okay. On the left, you see that hill with a big... Good shot. We're about an inch left of center.
Still right?
Still right. All right. Re-engage. Hold left edge.
From the left edge.
All right. Shoot ready.
Yes,
one last one.
It's so close.
The only thing from me, and none of the...
Hit. Hold center.
Yeah, shoot that one again now.
There you go.
Okay.
You got it.
And this man, it helps you find a direction to stop, push up, push down. I got it raised at about 900.
Hit.
And because of kind of that environment we were looking at, when I was out there shooting that day, I'd actually swapped, again, my prescription lenses from one to another, and I was using their lens kind of sitting around desert environments. And again, pretty distinct. Like if you looked up at the hillside, everything was pretty dry, and you throw those things on and a lot of contrast. All of a sudden you're like, oh, there's absolutely rocks there. Or here in the foreground is a bunch of, again, just different shades of brown, a bunch of dead grasses and reeds, but almost kind of making it 3D. Like you had very distinct layers and levels at distance of what you were looking at. It's pretty cool. And then something else pretty neat is one of the people on staff there, I guess, with Revision is this doctor, like eye doctor, and he trains people for like sporting clays, things along those lines, like incredibly high level shooters. And basically all this stuff kind of from the science side of like, hey, what is your eye doing? What do you need to be doing in order to like get hits quickly on sporting clays or trap skeet, all of that stuff. And so he was going through some different kind of tests with some of the people there to include eye dominance. And what I didn't realize is he kind of explained eye dominance differently in that like you have left eye dominant and you have right eye dominant, but you can also have like some shading in the middle there where it's not really strong one side or the other. But it was pretty cool getting to go through and have him kind of do his diagnosis and then like, okay, cool, we're going to start shooting these clay pigeons. So I need you to look like this is what you're looking for. This is where you need to break the shot. And getting the opportunity to go through it and see it kind of play out, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. And what it seemed like for me really was kind of not overthinking is what it came down to. In that once you have like some fundamental skill with things, like, hey, if you do this right now, like you're going to get this result. But if you overthink it, which people usually do, you're going to end up missing. And so how to basically essentially trust like that your brain and your eyes are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and just go with the process, which is pretty neat walking through that. Something that personally I really appreciate, whether it's in the firearms industry or honestly anywhere across the board, is people approaching things differently. As far as like, hey, how can we actually make a meaningful improvement on some sort of technology? By way of example, Revision with the I-Vis. I think it's pretty neat. They basically looked at all of these different regions where people like operate, military or otherwise, and like, okay, cool, like these are our main regions, and what are important colors? And using that technology to basically, again, kind of like extend out certain areas of that visible spectrum to where, you're getting more of these different greens. Like, it's still green. For whatever reason, through the magic of the technology, you're just seeing like all the different shades of green than you kind of otherwise would, which, I don't know, still don't totally understand it. It's amazing in practice though, and definitely creates way more depth than you would otherwise get, and with that, a lot more contrast to where you can spot things, which in the military capacity, like, usually pretty important to spot things, be it enemies, IEDs, all of those things. But pretty cool technology. And for me personally, while I do appreciate the technology, something really cool that is coming down the road is basically the incorporation of that technology and the ballistic lenses, like ballistic rating, all of those different things into prescription. So rather than having to use an insert, straight up ballistic prescription eyewear with their I-Vis technology, which I think is going to be really cool. But definitely grateful for the opportunity to go down there and see that stuff firsthand. And yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. So these, I believe, are out now and rolling out in the future. As of filming this, will be different lens frame styles, things like that. And they also have goggles, which are pretty cool in that they have a pretty cool technology with a goggle and like balaclava, things along those lines, to where it uses a magnet. So instead of trying to put a balaclava on and trying to constantly like pull the thing up, there's a little magnet kind of at the bridge and yeah, holds it in place, which is pretty sweet. But there'll be links down below. You can go check out Revision and their products, their I-Vis technology, all that stuff. And yeah, pretty cool stuff. And last but not least, if you appreciate my content and want to support it, greatly appreciate it. Whether it's liking and sharing my videos or going over to kitbadger.com, stickers, patches, things like that, or supporting me directly through Patreon. All that stuff helps me go out, create more content for you. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.
And I didn't go there. I swear that it was 'cause